they bring one more.
Okay.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
I know it's,
Yeah, you know,
I feel like it's pretty important to be.
where they said, at first what I was reading, where they said the river was gonna go, was making it a huge major flood.
Yeah, exactly.
And the landowner is compulsively checking the hydrograph to see what's going on. And she saw that they were falling from a lower level.
Yeah.
And I don't live where I farm particularly, I live about a mile away, we don't really flood where I live yet, I mean, we might, but, where I farm is, didn't used to be on the river, and now the river is taken like 648.
Yeah.
And, so we lost more in this.
Well,
They're doing a stream restoration
yeah.
project, east of the farm.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
So, it's changing the hydraulics of the river, and they raise a space line, so it's acting as a dam, and blocking the flow. So, you know, it's kind of, oh, wow, maybe we're gonna go start working with the Department of Transportation and get some of the projects on their list, but, you know, it's like trying to get something from it to
Well, there's a lot of money coming in for that stuff right now.
Yeah.
So, like, this is the time. Especially as
I just, and I
deal
do
with financial
hope that,
adaptation.
I remember the, you know, this last one, when it was shoveling project for the last year, or it was trying to get them to think. I just sort it out. I want to know the ways that they're gonna mitigate these impacts. It's hard to get the DOT. See, they're starting to think differently about things.
Yeah. Well, and then I started looking at some footage of Washington down in British Columbia.
That was
Oh, my God.
All right, I think we're gonna go ahead and get started. So I'm Melissa Spear, the Executive Director of Telp Alliance. And I'm gonna just start with having panelists introduce themselves and before we get into the content of this panel. So.
Hello everybody, thank you for being here. I'm Amy Simpson, I'm the Director of Advocacy and Product Sustainability for PCC Community Markets. I am from the Pacific Northwest, but spent a lot of time out east, particularly in Washington, D.C., working with very food-focused organic supporter organizations like Consumer Reports, Beyond Pesticides, Center for Food Safety. I'm a lawyer by training, but a foodie and passionate environmentalist by heart, so really excited to be here.
My name is Ann Schwartz, and I have a small farm in eastern Skagit County. Been involved with the tilth world for a very long time, and really excited to be here to talk about a rebirthing of an advocacy organization for Washington State.
I'm Brenda Book. I'm the program manager for WSDA's organic certification program here in our state. So I work with 1,200 operations here in Washington that are certified according to the USDA standards. Yeah, I'm excited to be here and be part of that conversation as well.
Hi all, I'm Amy Wong, and I am here representing the Oregon Organic Coalition, and I have spent a lot of time in the Pacific Northwest and initially came here to get a environmental law degree to work in regenerative sustainable agriculture. So I'm thrilled to be able to do that in an advocacy role, and I'm excited to hopefully get more regional efforts underway. Thank you for having me.
All right, I'm going to start by just giving a very brief account of sort of how it is that we've gotten to be sitting here at this table today. So I came to Washington State 3 years ago from the Northeast, from New England, and was immediately surprised by what seemed to me to be a lack of voice for organic, and worked closely in the New England with the Northeast Organic Farming Association, which is a very powerful voice for organic in New England. And it was surprised to see that something along those lines didn't appear to exist here in the Pacific Northwest. And was hearing from a lot of people like advocacy, you know, it's something that historically I think TILT was involved in advocacy, but that had lapsed over the last few years. And so in 2019, simultaneously somehow, Amy with PC Community Markets and I began exploring the possibility of developing some type of advocacy organization for the organic community here, forming a coalition, and began doing some outreach, first just independently, and then sort of recognized, hey, this is happening, why don't we join forces and begin exploring how we might make this happen. And so based on the feedback that each of us had received as we were doing our outreach in 2020, we formed a provisional steering committee was formed to begin working on establishing some type of governance document, mission, vision for a coalition here in Washington. And if I can actually make this work, this just sort of gives you a sense of sort of where we landed in thinking about what it is that, what a coalition, what our mission would be, what it is that we would attempt to be doing. And it's been founded to advocate for the continued development and growth of regenerative and organic agriculture in Washington State and beyond, and be formed as a powerful coalition of farmers, businesses, organizations, and activists in the organic and regenerative community, really serving as a unifying force to bring the power of the voices of producers and other actors within the organic community to advocate for policies, for resources that would benefit that community and really advance organic and regenerative, grow organic and regenerative in the state of Washington at all scales. And so I just wanted to share our mission statement. We advocate in support of the broad adoption of regenerative and organic growing practices by producers and gardeners of all types and all scales throughout the state of Washington. And for public policies and support, I want to be clear, we're not just focused on a legislative agenda, we're also focused on research and education, marketing and promotion campaigns for organic and regenerative resources to support organic and regenerative, and educational opportunities to ensure that farmers have the technical, have access to the technical expertise that they need to continue to be effective at organic and regenerative agriculture. So I'm going to stop there, and I'm going to ask a first question. I'm going to be the question asker. I'm going to ask Ann to step up first and talk a little bit about the brief history of the organic movement here in Washington?
Mark Music is here, so he could give me the specific date, but Whistleberry came and spoke at a very large gathering of people that wanted to understand more about our food world in 1970.
July 1, 70.
I knew our historian would know that date. I was almost going to call you yesterday. And he challenged, we have the script of that speech, and it's incredibly inspiring. And he challenged us, I wasn't there, to come together, to work together, to create a more agrarian, to not lose our agrarian roots, and to come together to work on solutions that were becoming very obvious in modern agriculture. I joined the Tilth Board in 1979, finding people who were as passionate and hardworking as I was, who wanted to do better. And I was very inspired to work with these people. We wanted to address issues with our employees and communities and really address the increasing awareness of the damage that was being done to our natural environments through modern ag practices. That speech birthed the Tilth movement across the Northwest, in Washington, Oregon, and Idaho. And at that time, the Rodale Institute, based in Pennsylvania, had been working to set an organic practices system in place through their magazine and their research centers in Pennsylvania. And so in the early days of Tilth Producers Cooperative, we were utilizing those standards to develop our own organic program in Washington State. And for many years, Tilth Producers administered the organic certification program in Washington. And then one of the board members at PCC was a legislator named Ken Jacobson, and he was very interested in creating a law to define what organic was. And it took us a couple years to get through. And one of the things that he talked to us about that has stuck with me all these years was the need for persistence, patience, and passion to make legislation happen, to make change happen. And we weren't successful getting this law passed the first year, but after that we did. And then we went on to create an organic certification program administered by the Washington State Department of Agriculture, where Brenda has been the key lead there for decades. Yeah, it's turning into a long time. And from that effort came the growing recognition that we were shipping so many organic products north and south, that California CCOF, Oregon Tilth, and Tilth Producers really needed to work together to harmonize our standards. And that effort was going on around the United States. It was happening in New England, it was happening in the Midwest, and we got some grant monies to create a National Organic Farmers Associations Council, and we all came together, and ultimately were able to create and pass a federal rule. We started working with other like-minded groups on critical funding initiatives in the Farm Bill. And another key critical thing, many farmers in the early days found not very much of a sympathetic audience with Washington State University Extension, but there were a few key faculty members that really wanted to work with the organic community. We started off with doing surveys and evaluations of where the farmers were, where the consumers were, and ultimately that partnership has blossomed into something that I have an incredible amount of pride in terms of relationships and progress that the organic farming community has made with in WSU, with the College of Agriculture there, and we were successful at birthing the Center for Sustaining Ag and Natural Resources back in the 80s, which has brought in a tremendous amount of resources and attracted a lot of research faculty who didn't have the support they wanted to do organic and biologically based research. So you know, I think the real critical thing is collaboration and meeting people that want to make a difference, and we have really made a lot of differences in 40 years. Something I want to just speak to very quickly is it was our full intention to have a black farmer on this panel, and we've been working with members of the BIPOC community for this whole process. Life has gotten in the way, and I'm really sorry we don't have more diversity sitting up here, because that is absolutely something that has been an important driver through this whole provisional steering committee process to craft this ongoing work.
Thanks, Anne. So, you know, we started out with that history because it's clear that advocacy has been transformative for the organic community here in Washington historically. And we're at a point in time where, again, I believe, and I think everyone here on the panel believes, we need to have a transformative future, that we're at this point in time where it is really important that we approach things differently. And so this is where the past informs the future and informs where it is that we need to go now and why advocacy is so important. So now I'm going to ask Amy to talk about what the Provisional Steering Committee has been up to, who the Provisional Steering Committee is, and what the work that we have been doing to move us toward the launch of the coalition.
Thanks, Melissa. So, you know, as Melissa said, I think there was a lot of unity. PCC has had a really long invested history in, you know, the organic food movement and supporting local regenerative organic practices, producers. We're a certified organic retailer, which we don't have to be. So this is like in the core of our mission. And we really, given my background coming out here, as Melissa said, you know, what we wanted to see was there needs to be a better voice. You know, we have such an incredible history. Washington has such an incredible history of advocating for these, you know, farming practices, for these, you know, supporting this, what we need to see in our future. And so with all that in mind, you know, that's how we all came together. But as Anne already noted, we also wanted to do this a little differently. You know, we wanted to make sure that the voices that we're bringing forward in creating a coalition were not just farmers or just retailers or just distributors. So we really wanted it to be a collective effort. And so the initial steering committee that we put together, and, you know, Tilt Alliance really did a great job of trying to reach out to as many different voices as they could to, you know, get interest in that. You know, we have people from food hubs, we have distributors like OGC, and you know, we have retailers, we have farmers, large-scale farmers, small farmers. As Anne pointed, we really tried to include BIPOC voices in this. You know, and we have the organizations like Tilt Alliance and the long, amazing board members that are a part of Tilt that have been a part of the organic movement. So there's really an incredible diversity of both youth, you know, experience, production, the entire supply chain, and it's really been a fascinating conversation, I think, for the last year. And, you know, there have been some really challenging parts, because I think all of us recognize that while, you know, organic particularly is we want to see this continue and grow, and I think are invested in this because we feel like it's lost a little bit of its recognition that it should have, especially at this critical moment. In, you know, understanding we need to change how we farm to support our future. It's also, we recognize has a lot to work on, and that there's things we need to improve. And so we're hoping in building that diverse group, and in the work we've been doing in the last year, you know, we've really been digging into some of this. What does this organization need to look like so that it's inclusive of membership ideas, that membership can be a diverse representation across the state. That's the other thing. We understand, like, our producers are not all located in, you know, Seattle and Puget Sound area. Like, this has to be a statewide effort. So, you know, what we've worked on is developing bylaws. We've, you know, crafted our mission statements. And a lot of these things obviously will become available as we we finalize these, get them on our website. We've worked on diversity statements and diversity and equity inclusion statements, and making sure that that is integrated into every aspect. I mean, we have combed our bylaws and had long, hard conversations about, okay, are we creating an organization that is going to be inclusive in ways that agriculture hasn't been, and organizations like ours haven't been in the past. And you know, I really would like to thank our BIPOC representatives for really driving that conversation. And I, again, with Ann, wish they were here to talk about that, because they have been the leaders and really done important work in us in crafting this understanding that we also all have this goal of promoting organic and regenerative agriculture, and that is also critically important. So that's kind of what we've been up to for the last year, who's been involved in that provisional steering committee, and now we're at this really fun time where we get to see kind of shape what it is we want to do, find out who wants to be a part of this, and I'll turn it back to Melissa.
So I'm going to have one more slide just to sort of see where, this is kind of where we've landed in terms of Cora structure through this process. And so Cora will be led by a governing council. That governing council will come out of membership because it will be a member organization, and membership, basically we've defined who can be a member as any person, business, organization who supports and endorses the mission, vision, and goals of Cora. And Tilt Alliance serves as sort of the finance and admin person, and so we'll just provide the administrative support, we'll host the employees of Cora, and manage the sort of the bookkeeping and accounting, and help raise funds for the organization as well. And so, you know, we're sort of at that point where we're looking at building membership and determining who many of the PSC members will transition over to governing council members, but also looking for who else is interested in joining both as a member and then perhaps as governing council, as a member of the governing council as we move forward. So with that, I want to open it up, and maybe I'll move to Brendan now to sort of just have more of a conversation around sort of what is the value of having this coalition here in Washington, and what are the kinds of things that we think we can achieve as a coalition. So.
Before I start, I do want to acknowledge I'm just really honored to be sitting here with 5 women and so we do, you know, that's a win right there. As Ann said, you know, WSTA, we became the oldest and the largest state-run certification agency in the country because of member-based advocacy from Washington Tilt Producers, or Tilt Producers of Washington. That's what it was at that time. And without that advocacy and that legislative effort, then we would not have such a robust organic industry here in Washington State. You know, we do really need to acknowledge just the, it's so unique. You can take all the certified operations that WSTA certifies in the state, and we surpass the total number of acreage and producers of any other state certification agency in the country. And so it's really significant. We set ourselves apart, and it was because of that effort. But all that was 35 years ago, and you know, we did. You know, Ann mentioned some other work that's happened, but as far as legislative work that directly impacts organic producers in this state, it's been 35 years. There was some efforts about 20 years ago to form an organic coalition, I'm sorry, not a coalition, commission, which would, in an effort to just unite those organic voices. But there were problems in the framework of that and kind of how it was being presented. It was only just producers. It didn't have the whole supply chain, and there were also not buy-in from all of our stakeholders. And I think, you know, the one thing that needs to be really from the get-go is, like Amy said, this has to be a state-run, a statewide organization. The majority of certified operations and acres are in Eastern Washington, not in Western Washington. We need those voices in order to have a full organic voice here in Washington State. And you know, if we can do that, then you know, there's so much that can be accomplished. I've been with WSTA now for 20 years, which I can't really believe that, but I have, and so I've seen a lot. You know, that's 20 seasons that I've worked with certified producers in this state, and we have 1,200 of those operations right now. Again, how large is Tilt Producers membership right now?
Tilt Alliance.
Tilt
Tilt
Alliance,
Alliance, yeah,
yes.
I mean, we send e-newsletters to like 4,000
Okay.
people, yeah.
Well, as far as, you know, before we did this merger, just thinking back to when I was on the board of Tilt Producers, you know, it was just a fraction, that membership was just a fraction of the certified operations in the state. And so again, there's just a lot of bridges that we need to kind of put out there and make sure that we're including them in the conversation. So my team, you know, by design, we cannot be the advocacy arm for Washington State. I just want to make sure that everybody understands that restriction that we have is, as a regulator, we cannot advocate. I mean, it's put in the regulation to have those different lines drawn in the sand, and so that we can focus on regulation. But we are the ones that are out there and seeing all the struggles. We see, you know, where there are holes in this industry. We see, you know, where farmers are having trouble accessing resources or solutions. We are the only ones that are in contact with every certified producer in the state. And so we desperately need that arm that we can pass the data onto, that we can pass the information onto, that we can pass the needs onto. Because it's been hard over the last 2 decades to be in the program and not have solutions for people, and not put them in touch with a way that they could make change and do things differently. And so, you know, we see that there's that need for that united voice, and that's not just a one type of cropping system, and it's not based on just the size of the operation, but it really focuses on that word organic. And if that word organic is important to you, and it's important in your marketing and your labeling and your communication with your customers and your own personal values, then that's what binds us together, and finding, you know, a way that the focus is on that organic label. Because there's a lot of different things that can happen. When the program was set up 35 years ago, it was explicitly stated in the law that we are a fee-for-service program. We do not receive any tax dollars. And so all of the work and the services that we provide to the organic industry are on the shoulders of those organic producers. There's opportunities to change that, but that's not changed through WSTA. That's a legislative process that stakeholders have to say, you know, tax dollars are important to go towards organic production. Tax dollars are important to ensure that integrity of that organic label, and to ensure that there are you know, means to investigate fraud and to make sure that that organic label has value. Right now, again, that framework is funded fully on the shoulders of the certified operations. So there's one opportunity of just changing the structure and bringing funds in that have never been there before. There's also cost share programs that can be put in place. Minnesota has a organic cost share program, to where in the state, you may have all heard about the National Organic Cost Share Program through the Farm Bill. Funds are available to reimburse certified operations, but states could do that too. You know, we could fill in that gap of where USDA funds don't really cover all of that cost. There's a need to have a voice on the national side. It's no longer a state law on what organic means and what those requirements are. It's a federal regulation, and unless Washington has a voice on that federal side, we're going to be left out of the conversations as those rules evolve and change. it really helps to have coalitions of farmers voicing the same thing. You know, we can encourage farmers to submit comments on the national level, so we get one here, but if you have just one comment that's backed up by 4,000 members, you know, what an impact that says and what a message that says on the direction that needs to, the standards need to go. There's also on Farm Bill funding. The National Cost Share Program was cut over the last 2 years, and so less funds are available. And unless we have people advocating and making sure it's known how important those types of programs are, you know, they disappear. There's also opportunities for marketing and research, and making sure that there are you know, those types of projects are funded specifically that will help organic operations. We've seen in the past, Oregon has had a shared position of somebody from the Oregon State University is also being funded by, at that point, it was Oregon TILF, a certifier. So you know, sharing resources to make sure that there are entities and people out there that can consult and that can provide the technical assistance that we as the inspectors and the regulators cannot provide. We need people that can teach operations what the standards are and how to implement them on their individual farm. We can talk about generalities, but people really need that technical assistance that's specific, site specific. So just, you know, those are just a few of the different opportunities that could happen. And really the sky's the limit when you start looking at how do we bring in funding, how do we bring in programs. Our agency has made it very clear that we will do whatever the stakeholders want us to do. We just need to, that process needs to happen. It can't come from us again. It has to come from the stakeholders, and you have to say, this is important, and then we have the ability to put resources towards that work.
Awesome, thank you, Brenda. And so now, Amy, I would love to hear from you what Oregon is up to and the Oregon Organic Coalition, and what opportunities you see for collaboration between ACORA, a coalition here in Washington, and the work that's going on in Oregon.
Absolutely, yeah, again, thank you for having me. And I want to say first, I like that the issue of equity in organic has been brought up, and that's certainly, we hear that a lot in terms of certification costs, access to land, all of these things. And where I'm at with that right now is that I see organic as being a great rural economic development tool, and hopefully that will a rising tide lifts all boats. And so that's not a perfect answer by any stretch of imagination, but that's just what I have to work with right now, basically. But the Oregon Organic Coalition has actually been around for 15 years, and it works to advance the development and growth of the organic industry and community in Oregon. And the basis for our work has really been that we are a member organization, so it's driven by membership, and it really represents the members of the trade as well as stakeholders. And this really goes to the relevancy and strength because we're speaking on behalf of a broad network of people. So often exactly what you all are talking about, how important that piece is. And it is desperately needed, and it sounds like, you know, so much has happened in agriculture from, let's say, the 30 years you were saying when you were trying to do this, like flash forward to who has been advocating in those 30 years, and has this voice been marginalized? Newsflash, yes, and it's really important that we ramp up that voice collectively because we have really powerful entities who are lobbying for different things. That's hard to get in on those conversations a lot of the time. In terms of the Oregon Organic Coalition, you know, it started out with very similar, the kind of, you know, organically grown company, Oregon TILF, the bedrock of Oregon's organic community, and we have a long history of honoring innovators and leaders in the organic community throughout our annual awards of excellence. COVID's kind of thrown everything off, but we look forward to getting back to that. But we've also long had a role in advocacy at things like aerial spraying, pesticide contamination, and recently, I'll borrow a term of art from Chris Schreiner, the ED of Oregon Tilt. We've been punching above our weight class because we've been an all-volunteer organization. But we were able to get Oregon's governor, Governor Brown, to declare an organically grown weed. We have been able to secure funding from 2 Oregon State University extension agents to focus on organic production, and do that very site-specific. And so we have Nick Andrews, who's here today speaking as well, doing vegetable production, and then recently, the second position actually got held up in a hiring freeze, and OOC advocacy got it unfrozen and filled, which might not have happened but for that advocacy. And the second position is working on pastures and forages. Dr. Cheyenne Bashar, he's been on the ground for about 6 months, already making an impact, doing some work with Organic Valley. Our other, I'd say, very important to the Oregon Organic Coalition is partnerships and access with agencies and administrations. And it's diplomatic work. And I would say we've been having quarterly stakeholder meetings with the Oregon Department of Agriculture. I've been participating for 2 to 3 years. I'm not exactly sure how long it's been going on, but quite a while. And we're just now getting to the point where we can start asking for things. It took years of just building that trust and relationship. So not coming in as like firebrand activists, which at my heart, I would love to be doing that. But these are the rooms where you actually really carefully build those relationships, and then you can start asking for things. So it's exciting that, you know, we had a call last year where we started talking about some of the thornier issues, like the Pacific Northwest is one of the best seed producing regions in the world. What are threats to those seed producers? A lot. And we're just able to start having those conversations because it's a very thorny issue. So that would be something I would recommend. You know, I know there's lots of farmer activism out there, but this is a place to be very cautious depending on who your legislators are. And, you know, we've had legislative champions in Oregon who, when you have one, run with them and do what they want, because other times you're going to be met with people who don't want to run with your issues, or there's always going to be so many other pressing issues in the world that they're going to want to focus on versus food systems work. Let's see what else. Oh, very key point. So we've also been working on an Oregon Organic Action Plan, and the Organic Action Plan movement, you know, California has one, very big national movement for that. And then we had some of our farmers going, wait, we don't need any more regulations. We're like, oh no, we're not trying to regulate you. We want to just support you. So the messaging on both sides is really important, but this is not about any additional regulation. This is about bringing in supports like OSU extension positions, or more funding. We have indeed advocated for more domestic marketing. Oregon has spent a lot of money, or Oregon Department of Agriculture spends tons of money on international, which there's a place for that, I understand, but we're like, hey, coming out of COVID, coming out of a pandemic where we saw those supply chains crumble, we need to build a resilient regional food system. Why don't we start putting money into domestic marketing? Unfortunately, that policy option package got taken out of Oregon's last budget, but that's something that we would keep pushing for. We also pushed for an organic specialist within the Oregon Department of Agriculture. We haven't gotten there yet, but again, these are the things you keep asking for. But we have also thought about the commission idea. The commodity commissions exist and have a lot of power. Could there be an organic one? How does that work? So that's an area of potential collaboration. And, you know, I would say our other big, right now we are going into our short legislative session, and we're lucky to have already secured a bill, and we're asking for another 5 positions, a cluster hire of extension agents to, again, aid various different parts of organic production that will help organic and non-organic growers. We see these methods being good for everybody, and we don't want it just shoehorned in under organic, but that's where we can get it into OSU's Center for Small Farms and Community Food Systems. And we're also looking for a grant to do, well, we want Oregon to pay for, an organic assessment, economic assessment of the organic industry and the impacts that that has. It's really hard to get funders to pay for data and economic assessment in the nonprofit sector. And we're almost hobbled because the other side has money coming out their ears and they have all the data. And if you're in a room and they have all that data, that's what goes. And we're like, hey, funders, please, please, we need these economic assessments. And it's so hard to get them. So ideally, if you could convince the state to do it because it's in the state's interest, that's great. So there could be collaboration. Like, what's the regional value of organic? You know, when we look at the Pacific Northwest and we look at what's going on in agriculture in the U.S., this is the last remaining area that isn't really planted out with a lot of commodity crops. We have the ability to be an incredibly diverse leader in organic, and I think that's a huge regional opportunity. Again, our seed production, you have the EU mandating organic seed use in organic production. The Pacific Northwest will be producing a lot of that seed. Quickly, I'll just give a plug. I work with Organic Seed Alliance, and we just released a Pacific Northwest regional policy platform and toolkit yesterday. And so at the seed panel tonight, I can help share the resource if possible. So I think seeds, the commodity commissions, the regional advocacy, potentially helping funding, having our networks align could be really amazing. And I'm not sure if you've heard of SIX, the State Innovation Exchange. They are working across the nation, and I would love to create like a regional food systems caucus of legislators who care about this issue, because legislators often don't want to be on the thin edge of the wedge. They want other people to do it, and then they'll jump on. So if we could kind of find a handful of really core supporters of food systems where we can help them have safety in numbers. I think that's about it.
Awesome, thank you, Amy. Brenda touched a little bit on the Farm Bill and sort of what's happening. You know, there's a national level of work going on, and so I'd like to touch on the ways that a Washington coalition can work at the national level, or the importance of the work that we would be doing at the national level. We're about to enter in, or we have actually, many have started at the national level. The Organic Trade Association, Organic Farmers Association, NOC are already deeply having conversations around the Farm Bill, which is going to be renewed, it's up for renewal. Those negotiations have already begun. And what is the Washington voice and how can we contribute? So I'm just going to open that up to whoever would like to speak to that on the panel here.
I'll jump in just with kind of one concept that I think, you know, as with every farm bill, I mean, it's critically important for organic because, you know, that is where so much of the funding comes from. It's the time to, you know, usually you're not going to have another time where you can get organic specific research support. I mean, it's just having that Washington voice is critical. But I think this year and this next round is actually even more critical because, as we all know, like, organic it's incredible. It's got so much in there. It hasn't always been carried out maybe to the letter of what was put into the law or the regulations. There's a lot of debates on how that works. And there's, I think, a growing recognition that there's some pieces that are not moving and functioning in the way that they should. And, you know, OTA, I know, has really been, you know, driving a conversation forward that, you know, that this is maybe going to be the time to see if there's going to be some changes to the actual Organic Food Production Act, which you have an entire other section of people who get very nervous about that because it can go really the wrong way. You know, but I will say, I think we have, at least in my past decade in working, you know, in organic, we've reached kind of a point where I think you've got a lot of people and conversations happening that there are some changes that I think a lot of are to support for the better. We want to make sure we emphasize the climate-friendly practices that organic already mandates. We want to close some of the loopholes that have not made that a clear messaging, and it's actually very frustrating, like, from a retail perspective, because no, organic does do that. It's just there's some outliers that don't practice that, but it is really the label we should be leaning into at this time because it exists and it's a functioning, amazing program that has such a strong certification behind it and meaning. And so I think that for the farm bills, you know, that's where I really see some opportunity for like the coalition and for Washington is to, this is the time for us to have a collective voice, because if there are changes to organic, if we are going to be opening that up, we want to make sure that just like 35, 40 years ago, we are a part of the leadership that keeps it strong, keeps it moving in the direction we want to see it. And I think that's a really unique issue that is going to be coming up this next Farm Bill cycle.
Is anyone else like to comment on?
Yeah, I'll jump in and speak for a moment specifically about agriculture research. Washington state legislators have been reducing the research budget, the budget period at Washington State University for decades. And as a result of this, several of the other major commodity groups have launched successful initiatives to build up the capacity to self-fund their research. And the organic community has not really done that. It's certainly one of the reasons that Brenda keeps bringing us back to the notion of creating a crop commission, which would help create a platform for generating funding for research. But the Farm Bill has historically provided the opportunities for specific funding opportunities. And because of the positioning of the Center for Sustaining Ag and Natural Resources and the collaborative effort they've done within the College of Ag, they have been tremendously successful at taking a little bit of state money that we squeezed out to fund biologically intensive and organic research projects through the Center for Sustaining Ag and Natural Resources. And these faculty members have been some of the most successful faculty in the land grant systems in the United States at leveraging little bits of money for these bigger research dollars to really get into critical details, you know, especially around managing funguses and insects. And, you know, there's always new challenges that get in the way of growers successfully producing a crop. And so some of the very important titles in the Farm Bill that we need to be speaking to is this research funding, the specific titles through the SARE programs and other programs. And so I went to college at WSU, I got my degree in animal science, and it is an area that I have retained a great deal of passion about, trying to change my alma mater. And there's more and more people that really believe that. We have some great WSU faculty members here this weekend who will love to talk about some of these challenges. But that is an important thing that our allies nationally are engaged in with the Farm Bill on a regular basis. And just to help with the alphabet soup, there's the OTA, which is the Organic Trade Association. There's NOC, the National Organic Coalition. There's NSAC, the National Sustainable Ag Coalition. And there's several others. There's regional sustainable ag working groups. And every 4 years, there is a very concerted effort to collect from the regions all around the country what the priorities are, and develop these platforms, develop speaking points, have fly-ins, help us communicate with those legislators that are at least sympathetic to what we're trying to do. And so the Farm Bill is a really important opportunity for a lot of that, and I wanted to wave the banner about organic research.
And I will say that we have had conversation with OTA. They know that we are in the process of organizing this coalition and are incredibly excited and supportive, as well as NSAC, at the work that we're doing here, and look forward to supporting us and connecting us up in Washington so that we can, in Washington DC, so that we can also make sure that farmers have a voice there, as well as working here at the state level on legislative and policy priorities. So I just wanted to quickly, also, I mean, what we've called ourselves is the Coalition for Organic and Regenerative Agriculture, and completely recognizing that regenerative is out there, it's important. A lot of us understand the importance of sort of the regenerative movement, and it's also challenging, and it's one of the challenges that we at CORE are going to have to address, because as Amy said, the organic certification, the value of that brand is incredibly important, and we're in a circumstance in the world right now that the more that conventional farmers can also move in the direction of organic, can adopt regenerative practices, the greater the impact on sort of the climate change mitigation, on all of the benefits that come with moving in the organic direction. And so somehow need to figure out how to support that, and at the same time really protect the organic brand, and also move continuous improvement is important, so really start moving organic again, looking at OTA saying we need to make changes, and I think some of that is to ensure that organic really lives up to the values that sort of are its origin story. So I just kind of wanted to make sure that you know that we recognize that this is a challenge, and that is something that we understand is we're gonna work with and hope that we can help move towards a future that reconciles that in some positive, productive way. So I'm just going to do a quick review of sort of, again, CORE next steps. Forming a governing, building membership, forming a governing council, or adding people to the governing council, raising funds. We know that there are already some sources of funds that are coming, but we will have to continue to raise funds. Hiring a program coordinator, working with membership, the governing council, to develop a policy agenda, and then begin the process of advocating, building relationships with legislators, and beginning the advocacy process, probably working with a lobbyist as well. And again, there is this urgency because of the Farm Bill to really try and stand this up as quickly as we can, to be in a position where we can have a voice going forward during this Farm Bill process, because it is going to be a really important Farm Bill this year. And we do, have a website that we put up, which you can find. It's cora-wa.org, and there is a way to sort of put in your name and contact info if you're interested in membership, in governing council, just want to learn more about what it is that we're up to. And we will post, so this has been recorded, and I think that we will also post this panel onto that website, so that anyone who visits can actually listen to this incredible group of people talking about what CORE is about and what we hope to accomplish. And so that's sort of where we're headed next. Those are the next steps for us, and our hope is that you will join us in that process, that you will let other people know that we're doing this, that you will invite them to visit the website to look at this this presentation and learn more. And so with that, I'm going to open it up to see if there's anything else that the panel would like to contribute. And then I'd like to open it up to questions or comments from any of you out here in the room. Wow, and listen, that was like, that was pretty amazing, actually. Let's see if I can turn that off. Yeah, I think we have about 10 more minutes, so I'm hoping that, yeah.
Can you give me the web address again?
It's www.cora-wa.org.
Thank you.
Hi, first of all, this was wonderful. Congratulations. I'm a dietitian, and I call myself an eco-dietitian. I'm working at that space between connecting the dots between how we grow our food and the nutritional content of food and the human health implications. So I'm curious from you all, how are you highlighting and amplifying the way that organic and regeneratively grown food actually has health benefits?
You should repeat the question.
Oh.
Just
So,
so.
so if I'm understanding you correctly, you're just wanting to understand what the coalition's ambitions are as far as promoting the health benefits behind organic and regenerative food production.
Yes.
Is that accurate?
Wonderful.
I can speak to that just a little bit, just because it is something that, you know, I work daily with in, you know, working with our shoppers and our members at PCC. You know, there's no question that the science and the data, you know, supports that organically produced and regeneratively produced foods, you know, have better nutrition. Not only that, they're healthier for the people producing those foods, reduced exposures to pesticides, you know, just, I mean, that's one of the primary ones, but I think it's one of those things that is going to be an incorporated talking point, absolutely, for the coalition, and that's also one of those you know, we would want to work with experts like yourself and other people to help develop those talking points and get that information out to our legislators, to our, you know, administrators, to our agencies. You know, that's one of the things that I think we find is lagging, is that there is a lack of recognition of these benefits that we all know exist there, that we have the scientific support for, that just because organic has been around for so long, sometimes people forget that. So I think that's one of the driving forces behind the coalition, is to be able to message that and then drive these supporting policies that will help expand and increase the amount of organic that we see in our state.
On Thursday, maybe it was Wednesday, the Organic Center had a free webinar on bionutrients, on the benefits. They had a release of some studies on the benefits of the nutritional value of organic and regenerative agriculture. Your question exactly, that should be available for everybody as a free webinar on their site. Organic Center is an arm of the Organic Trade Association. So again, another good partner as this organization moves forward. There's some more resources.
I would just add that depending on who your legislator is, like we currently in Oregon right now, one of the most powerful legislators is a physician. And so we're really hoping to use this tack because other messaging hasn't really gotten through to her. And so indeed, I would want to take in this type of data to hopefully sway her. So it would be very useful.
We do have a pediatrician on the national side that's been one of the biggest supporters for making sure cost share funding is there and has reached out to our agency. So, you know, I would, that's what we've seen too, are those legislators that have a background where they can relate and understand what we're talking about. Once they get it, they take it and run with it. Yeah.
So watching what's happened with the organic movement over the last couple of years, especially at the regulatory level in DC, you've seen a certain amount of fracturing between the small producer and then the large agri-producer, corporate producer. And one of the big things that's on the table, that was on the table and has been a decision made, was the decision on hydroponic growing. And the fact that they changed the standards going, you know, the way the wording was, you know, basically removing in the soil and allowing hydro growing. Is that something that Cora has made a decision on yet, or plans to? Because I feel there's a lot of people that, you know, a lot of different growers had a different opinion of that and the fracturing and where that's taking the organic. You know, you can get container food now that's organically certified. And, you know, as a small grower and regenerative grower in the dirt, I feel like that's disingenuous to all of us. So is that something that's been decided or thought? Is that tabled, or is that?
Yeah.
Wow, talk about a not soft question. Yeah, so the question is addressing hydroponic growing, which is a very fraught issue within the organic movement. And again, one of those issues, as I mentioned, that is definitely, I think, being discussed in this next farm round. I mean, it's both being discussed and not being discussed, but it's one of those potential things that's out there is it time to strengthen what is written in the Organic Food Production Act to clarify this is not absolutely not allowed, or rewrite it so that there's more clarity on labeling and identifying what is hydroponically grown. I mean, there's a lot of division and thoughts on that. When it comes to whether the coalition has made the decision on that, no, we haven't, because we are just the provisional steering committee, and we really want this to be rooted in what the membership wants. And that's, I think, one of the things that we're really excited about in this next phase is how can we make sure that the voices of our membership are reflected and driving what our actions are. You know, personally, I mean, I think a lot of us individually as members in the coalition, I know PCC, we joined the petitions to say that hydroponics should not be allowed in organic. The court ruling didn't agree on that, so that was a bit frustrating. But again, I'm not going to speak for other coalition members, because again, this is a coalition, and we really want to make sure that we find what can bring Washington together to give us the strongest voice for organic. And sometimes that's compromising, but also upholding what we want to see going forward. So does that answer your question?
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and can I just add really quickly, so we've talked a lot about sort of what the decision-making process is going to be as a coalition, and it is complex, because there are going to be controversial issues like this where we may feel the need to actually reach some sort of a conclusion with regard to, or a position with regard to this. And so the consensual decision-making process is sort of a powerful way to move through, to attempt to move through that controversy and reach a decision where there is largely consensus around it. And so we've really thought, in going through the process of developing these governing documents and policies, some of the most important policies and procedures, we've thought a lot about sort of how this coalition is going to operate and the ways that we are actually going to ensure that we're hearing the membership, that the voices are being heard and actually considered in the positions that we take. So, and so there was another question out there somewhere. Addie.
You spoke to this already, and I feel like I just want to dig into it a little bit more, which is this like organic versus regenerative, because regenerative is organic is a little bit easier to put in a box, and regenerative is this big squishy term that we don't really know what it means. And so I'm interested to hear you talk about like how are you going to build a big tent that is inclusive of the folks who might be more in that moving toward regenerative camp. I mean, when we think about regenerative or soil health practices, the scope of the opportunity to make change is massive. I mean, just like the percentage of acres enrolled in cover cropping is abysmal, right? And so how can we build a big tent that we're bringing people in for whom organic may not resonate, but who could be really powerful allies in advancing resources to help us do better by soil health?
So, I mean, I'll just quickly say, when we talk about regenerative, there are two ways of thinking of it. And I think if you just think in terms of the practices themselves, I don't think that it's controversial to support farmers adopting practices that you might call regenerative, but you can also call it cover cropping. You can call it no-till. You can call it, using soil amendments in a particular way, or doing, incorporating animals onto your farm. And I think that there's, that it is not controversial to support those practices and to find ways to put resources for farmers who may not be certified organic to adopt those practices. And that doesn't necessarily hurt the organic brand or and it's the controversy is around when you get to the marketplace and are how can you position yourself as a regenerative farmer, and when there's not a definition around regenerative, and go to the consumer and say you should buy my products because they are quote unquote regenerative. And so that's a whole other ball of wax, but I think that we can support regenerative practices and support farmers who want to adopt regenerative practices and continue to really hold up the organic brand at the same time. That would be one way that I would think about being able to both support regenerative farming and ensure that the organic brand is protected. But I would love to hear from others on the panel.
I think one area where we have some bridges to gap and some work to be done, and why a coalition could be important, is making sure that there isn't that divide, that there's not organic that turns somebody off. Like, okay, why is it turning you off? What is it that that we need to make sure that is part of that organic? Because all those practices that Melissa's calling out, that putting labels on them, those I think of just compliant organic practices. And so those are organic, should be regenerative. There's a part of the regulation that says producers must maintain and improve soil and water quality. It's written in the regulation. We have some problems in, I think, implementing that part of the regulation. And where a coalition could do work is making sure that that part of the regulation is strong and solid and meaningful, and so that let's address why there's a divide, instead of thinking that we have two different camps that we're going to have to balance out. And I think it's one of the reasons the organic standards have been in place on the federal level for a few decades now, and we know where there's work to be done now. Now we know, okay, where are they missing the ball here? Where is it not addressing the situations that we're in right now? And so let's look how, as a membership, we can get that message out there. We can look at how we can get the National Organic Standards Board to strengthen that part. How we can get the National Organic Program to require certifiers to require that of every producer. And so I think that's another avenue that we can take, and why a coalition, again, is important, is making sure that we don't have two different camps, and that those words, are maybe somebody chooses one word over the other, but they have the same sort of background.
Brenda, thank you. I couldn't agree more that the language and the regulations and the standards are there. Organic is regenerative, but what we recognize, and what the coalition, I think, really wanted to do in acknowledging that not everyone can be certified, that there are barriers for some of our producers to being certified, that doesn't mean that those practices can't be something that we're continuing to educate and drive forward. And as Anne has emphasized, the funding, the support, the education, the research, that is not exclusive to organic. Those practices, those supports can go towards any farmer, any producer, who is wanting to move this forward. Now, as a retailer representative on the coalition, one of the things that is, I think, important here is what Brenda's emphasizing, and that we're bringing those two together, in that regenerative doesn't have definition, and it's a slippery slope there. And from a consumer perspective, I get really nervous because you don't know what that means. And that's why organic was started 40 years ago, was because there was different meanings for all of those practices being done in different ways. So in a way, it's about getting people back to, it's not that organic is the only thing you can do, but that if you are wanting that certification, if you're wanting that standard to mean something, that is, the ultimate goal. But these regenerative practices need to be supported across the board. And so I think that's what the initial conversations we've had. But again, this is one of those areas that we really want to, there will undoubtedly be conversations with the membership. We are so lucky to have, WSDA be a leader in this area and be wanting to work with us on this. So I think there's just so much opportunity that we can listen to these voices and really craft and model a way forward with, and not have that division, and really help guide the nation on that. So it's exciting.
And my only comment on this would be that Derek Sanderson, who is the director of the Washington State Department of Agriculture, has been actively engaged on the advisory board for the Center for Sustaining Ag and Natural Resources for several years. So we really do have a sympathetic, interested leadership in the Department of Ag, and we're in a good position to lobby for change.
Great. Back in the corner.
Hi, so I'm at WSU, and so I wanted to touch on a couple of things that were said on this last topic about bringing in kind of a broader umbrella, and I want to be really explicit about just don't count out the East Side and East Side growers. There are lots of reasons why people are not organic, and it's not just that it may not brood with them. There are agricultural and climatic reasons that things don't fit there. And yet there's a lot of movement and a lot of desire to become more regenerative, however that looks for them. So really reach out and embrace those folks. Although, in your mind they may be conventional, they're really doing the best they can. And the other aspect was about, maybe I should have, a full mess on saying this, but please do advocate for research and extension funding for WSU, because it is, everything that was said is really true. We don't have extension agents who are just doing extension anymore in Washington State. Everyone is being pressed to do research using competitive federal grants. It would be amazing to have people who just are doing public education outreach. I'm here, my people are here on federal dollars, and that's the only reason we're here, is because we have a federal grant. And likewise, on the research side, practically every position we get at WSU has to have some sort of commission funding behind it. We currently have no soil fertility person, no soil chemist in the state of Washington within the WSU system. So we're starving at the base of like soil science. So just another plug for that. Thank you.
So, Lynn Carpenter Boggs, just so you know who was just speaking.
All right. Are there any other questions? Addie.
Sorry, not to monopolize, but I have like 100 questions. There's lots of chatter in the ether about regenerative ag standards being developed, soil health brand certification programs, carbon sequestration certification programs being developed. And I'm interested in your thoughts on that and where you think this group might engage or not.
Sorry, I feel like okay, all right. Yes, there's no question that is a part of the discussions going on right now, and I think it's a very real thing that both organic and regenerative and everyone in between needs to be a part of that conversation. And again, I would say why I am particularly excited about this coalition, because I do this work on behalf of PCC, but it's just one voice, and so if we have that collective voice to say, like, look, this is, organic needs to, and I think these will be part of the conversations, is, what do stronger soil fertility standards look like? I mean, I would argue along with Brenda, they are there. We have the framework for that within organic, but that needs to be better defined, especially as we're learning more. And, again, we need to invest in the research that educates us on what does true soil fertility look like, whether you're organic or not, because that's what really needs to guide these policies that are being put forward at kind of a frantic but necessary pace. And so I think that we do need to be a part of those conversations. Also, making sure that the people who have been leading this for 3 decades are a part of those conversations, because they have more knowledge than any scientist in a lab who, yes, is looking at different factors that we're learning about, but that we need to bring those two worlds together. And that's where I really see the value of, no, it doesn't have to be exclusively organic, but we do all need to help shape these policies going forward. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for organic to integrate that and make sure that we are a part of that conversation and a part of the benefits that are going to come out of that for the producers that have been doing this.
And if the coalition wants to define what regenerative means in Washington state, that's what you did in 1985, was define what organic meant. And so if it's determined that the membership finds this important and that, you know, you want to be able to market it, and there are all these different certifications coming in and it's confusing the consumer, like there's again, that's an opportunity that the coalition could do, is define it in Washington. Let's be a leader in that. And not just kind of stand by and just let it's like Amy said, we're heading into kind of back in the day where organic had a bunch of different meanings. And so if there's a new term that has a bunch of different meanings, there's solutions that as an organization and as a stakeholder group, you could fix that in Washington and make it be what makes sense for our Washington producers.
I would add, in Oregon, we actually did advocate for a soil health specialist as well as a soil health assessment. And we didn't get the assessment, but through a partnership with NRCS, we did get the soil health specialist. And I'm not sure how long they're going to last. I'm hoping that we can get funding in perpetuity for that person. But if we were advocating to gather the data that we need to help drive some of those decisions or drive some of those definitions, and so I think that's where it starts again. Hopefully now that we have this soil health position, they can then drive the assessment, because of course soil health looks different in different places. We want to be taking, you know, really looking at the state, like again, the east and the west, very different places, and then get into some of those decisions. And then when you look at agency capacity, it gets scary too. You know, some of these agencies aren't per se set up to do that, and so I think having the data first to drive the conversations, and then hopefully advocate for more resources to agencies to be able to handle that stuff. But yeah, it's certainly exciting. I think being a coalition that can advocate for a definition would be a great use of the coalition's strength.
And Washington probably has the best statistics and data already out of any state in the country, because thanks to the great work of David Greenestein and WSU. And so, you know, we're a couple steps ahead. Again, like there's a lot that's there. We just don't have the entity to hand that all off to and to say, you know, let's do something with this.
Okay, so it's noon, it's time to head over to lunch, but I encourage all of you to go ahead and visit the Cora-Wash website. If you're interested in continuing to track where we are, direct other people to the website, fill out the evaluation for us, and thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
Leave those evaluations and everything. Thank you. It is, but I'm coming back for it. Thank you.
Yeah. I would say organization, I'm in the process of becoming a host to it. I live there 7 days. Cool. I'll let you. But yeah, people have one in my bag. So looking to get people as farmers, and then also residents.
You're in person.
I'm real. I don't exist just on the screen. This is well, probably because this is great.
Hello to everybody. Nice to meet you. Yeah, of
I'm coming to your talk yet. All right. All right. Good luck. So glad to work
Hi. Good, how are you? I got eggs from you last weekend. I don't expect you to remember.